Hello, everyone. I am Terry from Swamp Fox Bookstore. We'll be getting started in just a moment here. Need to close that. Okay, and I think we'll be heading over to the Instagram feed. It always takes a few seconds for that to come through. So I think we're all set here. So welcome everyone to Swamp Fox Bookstore's virtual event. My name is Terry, and I am one of the owners of Swamp Fox Bookstore. Our shop started in July of 2020, and we are delighted to be celebrating 5 years as an indie bookstore in Eastern Iowa. And we do ship around the country and around the world. So if anybody is wanting a copy of any book, including Lidia's new one, we were happy to do that. In that time, since we've been open, we've hosted many in-person, and since we did open during the pandemic, we've hosted many virtual events. And today we are delighted to welcome Lidija to join with us here online. Hi, Lidija.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. So Lidija is a book coach and author of literary fiction. Before becoming a novelist, she was a practicing attorney at law, spending her days trying cases before Croatian courts. Her nonfiction essays have been handpicked by Medium's editorial team and featured on the Medium homepage, which earned her the title of top writer in the fields of psychology, self-awareness, personal development, self-improvement, and more. And most recently, her personal essay was published in the New York Times Modern Love column. She lives in Zadar, Croatia, with her husband and her 2 children. And when she's not writing or coaching writers, she can be found sipping coffee with her husband on one of her hometown's piazzas, or scrapbooking and buying too many books with her girls. I think I have the same problem. Cross virtual paths in the pre-pandemic days, and I was telling her before we got on, I am so delighted to be celebrating the release of Slanting Towards the Sea with her today. So and just a little bit about the book before we jump in here. So I just want everybody to be familiar with that. So Slanting Towards the Sea spans 20 years and one life-altering summer in Croatia. And it is at once an unforgettable love story and a powerful exploration of what it means to come of age in a country younger than one's self. So welcome. So excited.
Thank you so much. Love the introduction. Thank you. Yeah, it's true that I do drink a lot of coffee like every good Croatian.
I've known you for several years, and I know that you have a circuitous journey to being a published author. Can you please share a little bit about your journey with our viewers today?
So yeah, thank you so much for that question. So like you said, I used to be an attorney at law. I'm trained as a lawyer in Croatia. And for 10 years, I tried cases before Croatian courts. And then not to get in too much into the weeds of all the circumstances that were, conducive to this change, but I decided to quit law in 2019 and to try my hand at writing, which was a very, difficult decision, and it didn't sound very, logical at the time because I didn't have anything going for me. I was trying to write my first book, in my second language. I had not been living in any Anglo-Saxon, speaking country. So I was, I'm not trained in any writing related. I was not trained at the time in anything writing related. So I had a lot to learn. The curve was very steep. But after a while, I started connecting with writers outside Croatia. And during that period, it really became obvious that that my legal skills, from the courtroom really translate beautifully into book coaching. And then I found Jenny Nash, who is the founder of Author Accelerator, which is the company where you and I met, and where that trains book coaches basically. And so for a while I worked as a book coach, and then after a while I also started writing again, and the result of that is my debut novel, Slanting Towards the Sea.
So what is Slanting Towards the Sea about, and what do you feel will draw readers to the story?
Well, I guess like every literary fiction novel, it's very difficult to you know to say what it's about in just like one thread or one sentence. It's a layered story. So there's a love story element,
Mhm.
which is not a romance. It's a different type of love story. It doesn't follow the romance novel genre novels usual formula. There's also a coming of age element. There's also political and societal backdrop of emerging Croatia. So I think it's something that can appeal to an audience who likes midlife coming of age stories, relationship stories, complicated relationships, and with a side of a cultural background set in some other country, which Croatia really does come alive in the book.
It does. I want to go there now. It's like on my bucket list.
You're welcome to come. You're welcome to come.
I also learned more about it because there's an episode of Somebody Feed Phil where he goes to Croatia in one of the more recent seasons. So I was enchanted with that.
Wow. Love that.
So you talked a little bit about the political layer in this. And so can you share a little bit about how Ivana's, is that how you pronounce her name?
Yes.
Her story mirrors that of Croatia?
So that's a great question. So Ivana is, she's when the book opens, she's 38 years old. She's divorced from the man that she considers is the love of her life, and her life is not going well. Like she works at a stationery shop, even though she's a biological engineer by training. She's living with her dad, who is afflicted by a massive stroke some years before that, and so she's in this very stagnant, difficult position. And originally, I hadn't planned to involve Croatia as much and the political situation and societal aspects of it in the novel. But in really unearthing Ivona's story, it became clear that a lot of the reasons why her life ended up in that place, in that like stifled, stagnant place, was because there are certain limits to how you can live your life in Croatia. I mean, the same is true probably for every country. Every country where you live, it dictates how, what you can do, what you can become, what you can, study for, what you can afford in terms of healthcare or, childcare, etc. But for Croatia, it's really, it can get to the very, bottom of the dreams that you have. It can really, stifle you and stymie your progress. So in that sense, Croatia did play. It's in the background of the plot, but at the same time, it does put around a cage of sorts around the protagonist and what she can do in her life and what she can't.
There's expectations not only on her as a person, what the expectations her family has put on her, but because the country is so new, there's expectations on that, first, second, third generation to make the country great, right? To make it something more than what it was. So yeah.
Yeah, that's true. And also there's a lot of it was not something that I thought about while I was writing the book, because these things are embedded in my subconscious. I don't think about the way we are because we are just that way. But in receiving reader feedback, especially feedback from people who readers from America who are Slavic in background, it became clear that there are certain parts of the mentality, of the Slavic mentality, that really permeated the book in the way that I hadn't, planned. It just occurred. But it is a different sort of setting to, what maybe American readers are used to reading about, of the books, from the books set in the US, because it's such a powerful way of being limited by a country and really sometimes not having the hope to change your circumstances.
So, as you've mentioned, English isn't your first language, and I did see a little. You did an interview about that recently. I watched a part of it on YouTube. Can you share a little bit about what it was like to write in your second language? What are some struggles that you had, and what were some of the joys that come with writing in a language that is not your primary language?
Thank you. I think it's obvious. It's not my first language. I'm trying really hard, and
I've always said you sound wonderful when you speak. Like it's amazing.
I promise my writing is better than my speaking. But English is my second language up until the point where I started writing in English, which was in 2019, as I said. I had learned English for a total of 8 years in elementary school and high school, and then I just really, I tried to translate my first book into English, and I paid someone to do it, and then they used Google Translate, which was horrible. This was way before AI, so it was not usable. And so at that point, I really had to decide whether I want to let the whole thing go or do it myself. And it was a long process. It's I won't lie that a lot of times I was frustrated with feeling that I will never be able to express myself in English the way I can express myself in Croatian. And also, that there are words in Croatian that you can't really use in English, and when I was deciding whether I would translate my first book or that's safely shelved, I should say. It's not published. But when I was thinking about translating it, I actually tried to translate it myself, and then I realized that that's a skill I do not possess. Mm-hmm. Translating is an art form of a completely different it's a completely different art form than writing. And so I ended up rewriting whole sections of my book in English, and that was much easier for me. And so over time, I just learned how to think in English while I write. And so when I come to the page right now, it's always, I'm just thinking in English, and I just write in English. And then sometimes I will have that moment where I'm missing a word, because obviously I hadn't been building my vocabulary for decades upon decades, like I would have had I been born in the US. But then I have to go back to figure out what that word is in Croatian, and then find a suitable translation to English. So it's always a process. But there are a lot of ways of there's a lot that I enjoy about that process as well, because I think that I really love the English rhythm of the language. Croatian can often sound a little bit stifled in prose, and I never liked that about Croatian prose. And so now when I opened that first book that was written in Croatian, I cringe a lot, because it's impossible to, even now when I'm rarely, because I communicate mostly with Americans and British, but when I write an email in Croatian, it always sounds very stifled. It's always very formal. And so now I'm not sure if I could write a book in Croatian. So yeah, it's a whole thing, but I'm enjoying the ride.
Comparison between the two languages. I don't know that I've ever heard two languages compared that way. Like one is like more, effusive and emotional, and then one feels more stifled. That's very interesting observation.
I mean, Croatian is a very, it has like strong emotions. It has a lyrical language, mm-hmm. but there is a certain formality in how it's expressed that the English language doesn't have. And I feel like the English language, for that reason, is more is something I'm leaning towards more, if that makes sense.
Yes. And we actually have a question for you from Natalie. She had a question about the inspiration for the relationships in the book. Did you always know you wanted the love story to pan out, or did your plan change as you wrote?
Thank you, Natalie, for your question. I love that question. And the answer to that was I actually wrote the first draft with a completely different ending. So I didn't know how the story will pan out at all. I just knew that I had to finish the book, and didn't I didn't have an idea of how it could end, except by going into the formulaic way, most books kind of like, there's a formula to certain books. If a person is shy, then by the end of the book they learn not to be shy or something. And so in that same sense, there was a formulaic way where, uh, without understanding like how I could end the book, I just like wrote it in that way. And from the get-go I knew it wasn't the right ending, and I wasn't happy with it. I was just like, it was impossible for me to envision anything else. And so I always find inspiration in reading. Like when I'm stuck as a writer, I always turn to books. And so I was reading a memoir by Maggie Smith, You Could Make This Place Beautiful, which is a beautiful memoir that has nothing to do with my book. It's like a completely different story. But there was something about that book that really opened something in my mind. And there was this moment where, a light bulb went on, and I knew what I had to do to end the story the way it's now ended in the book. Thank you for your question.
Awesome. So can we talk a brief minute about the beautiful painting on the cover of your book? How were you able to find the perfect image to capture everything that slanting towards the sea feels?
That's such a great question. And the only thing that I can say is that I manifested it. I truly, there's no other explanation to what happened. So it all started on a New Year's Day when my husband and I went swimming. And he took this picture with me in the sea, and it was just very reflected, and it was very similar to this. And even this is not a story about me in any shape or form. I've been happily married for 20 some years, so it's not my story. But there was this reflectiveness about the image that really made me think something like this should be the cover of my book if I ever finished the book. I was in the middle of writing my first draft. And so a year later, I already had an agent, and we were about to go on sub. And this painting jumps out on my Instagram profile. And I looked the person up. Her name was Hannah Tischler. It sounded international, but when I looked her up, it turned out that she was a Croatian living in Lisbon. And I'm like, okay, this is another sign. Okay. And so writers never have a say about what gets to be on their covers. The book is, you as a writer provide a manuscript, but the book is a product for the publisher. And the publisher knows how to package that product best for the marketplace. And so the most that you can get as a writer is the right of approval. So they will give you, some mock-ups, and you get to say if you approve or not. And usually if you don't approve, you will get a different version of that same mock-up until you accept. So basically they run the show. But they ended up liking this particular painting so much that they just they put the title on, and that was it. There was never another direction with the cover, and I'm just very thrilled. And when they cleared the rights, I actually reached out to the artist, and it turned out that she's basically on an island just off coast of my hometown at the time.
Oh my goodness!
During summer, yeah. And in a week's time, we met in my hometown, and now I own the painting. I was able to pay for the painting, because she said that it was on the verge of being sold and the deal fell through. And so last minute it didn't sell. And so when I asked, is it available still for sales? Because I couldn't imagine it not being, it's like it embodies the whole book.
Yeah.
And when she said that it's still available, I was just blown away. So I think the easiest answer is that I really manifested it, because I have no other explanation for this story.
That is amazing. I remember I wanted everybody to hear the story, because I remember you posting about it on Instagram, and I was completely like, my jaw dropped. I was amazed, because it just every serendipity, everything lined up for it to be the cover of your book, and that it's a Croatian artist as well is so amazing.
Yeah, especially since she is also establishing herself abroad from like both of us are Croatian and tied to Croatia, and she also visits Croatia. She lives in Lisbon, but we're trying to establish our careers outside. Yeah. And so that was really fascinating. I'm just really happy that I could bring some attention to her work in this way.
Wonderful. So one more question I have for you that I didn't put on the list, I just thought of. Where did the title come from?
And that's a good question as well. So I actually had a different working title, and I struggled with titles. I always struggle with titles. The title is the hardest part of writing my, any book for me. So I had a different title going into the querying process. And so when I got three agent offers of representation for this book, and the unanimous feedback was that I needed to change the title, which I totally agreed with, but I couldn't. I really didn't know how to come up with anything better, and so I set out to go through the book, pick out the phrases, play with them in different ways, put a play on words. And then I came up with like this document of maybe 20-ish choices. And then I sent it out to 15 or so writing friends. And they all had their preferences, but Slanting Towards the Sea was the clear winner. Like everyone said, this one is good. So it ended up being there. It does have metaphorical and literal and, multiple meanings in the book. So it is represented in the text of the book.
That's amazing. I do think the title is perfect. It says so much about the story and the feelings in it, and I think that's great.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, there was something about that title that really reminds me, even though again a completely different book, but it reminded me of Slouching Towards Bethlehem by Joan Didion. So that's a good comparison to have in mind.
So you talked a little bit, your journey started as a book coach. So can you tell us a little bit about your writing process? What inspires you? What does the day in the life of an author look like for you? Because I know that you're also a busy spouse and a busy parent on top of everything else.
So yeah, thank you for that question. It's book coaching is such a huge part of it, because as a writer, I struggle with accountability most. So while I was writing Slanting Towards the Sea, another person that you might remember from our author accelerator circles, Nita Collins, was my critique partner. And she and I exchanged 20 pages at a time every 2 weeks. And so this was instrumental in my process, because I don't think if it weren't for her, I don't think I would have put butt in chair, as they say. It's really difficult for me to force myself to work on my novel when there's so many other things going on. So this idea of exchanging pages every 2 weeks was really instrumental in getting those pages onto the, getting the words onto the paper. So that was that's a part of my writing process. Right now, I'm not writing as much because there's so much work, around the book's publication. There's writing essays for, Lit Hub or Electric Literature or New York Times. There's a lot of things that goes into publishing a book that's not visible on the outside. So I'm slow at writing my second book, but I'm trying to
there'll
get.
be another one.
There's another one, yeah.
And I'm just going to ask the audience here if they have any questions, either on Facebook or YouTube or Instagram. I'm watching the comments. We've got some people that have pre-ordered it. Someone else has said they're really looking forward to reading the book. So some great buzz out there, and we're really excited. I'm especially excited that it's out in the world. So get those questions in. I've got one more question for Lidija before we end this stream and let her get back to being all busy with her life and get her butt in the chair to write that next book. One question while we're waiting to see if there's any more questions come in before I ask that final question. What have you been reading, or are there any books that are coming out this year that you are super excited about that you would like our readers and the people watching the broadcast to know about?
Yeah, so there are so many books that I'm looking forward to. There's This Kind of Trouble by Tochi Eze is the book I'm most excited for in summertime. It's this sweeping generational love story set in Nigeria. And it's just, I was with Tochi on a panel for Library Journal this spring, and I got her early reader copy. And life got in the way. I didn't get to finish it, and so I'm pressed to go back to it because the writing is so good. It's so good. And also, obviously, because she's my literary hero, Lily King's Heart the Lover comes out in October, I think. I'm super excited for that. Also, there are so many books that I recently read that I just adored. Audition by Katie Kitamura, The Anthropologists by Aysegul Savage, Dream State by Eric Buchner. There are just too many books. It's such a pain. It's such a pain to be surrounded with all those books and not be able to read them all. I think it's just it's devastating in a way.
It is. I feel your pain there. Also the pain when you read something that doesn't come out for a year or 6 months and there's nobody to gush about it with. I think that's somewhat the hardest about it, being in this side of the publishing world.
Yeah, for sure. I can only imagine. I mean, it's by the time the book comes out, it's like old news to you. That you're so over it. You're always six months ahead of the curve. Yes. Yeah, I imagine it's super frustrating.
So we did have one last audience question here, again from Natalie. She says, what was the inspiration for the olive grove in the book? Do you have experience with olive trees or harvesting olives?
Okay, so in Croatia, everyone has. In this part of Croatia where I'm from, in Dalmatia, everyone has some experience with olive trees and harvesting. Every family has a plot of who has a plot of land. They have olives, and so it's a part of cultural conversation. In November, it's always the question: when is your time in the mill? How many liters did you get this year? Did you have any pests over the summer? How did the drought affect your yield or whatever? And the other part of my connection with olive trees is my dad, who before he got his stroke, he had it was his hobby. He tended to olive groves, and he was a sensory analyst olive oils. And so that was the part of the story that I stole from him and gave to my protagonist.
I did not know that. It was sort of like here, you have your garden here, we have tomatoes and cucumbers and zucchini, but I did not know that about olives in Croatia. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, it's a
my
part
last
of the
question.
Yeah. Sorry.
Part of the everyday.
Yeah, it's
So my last question for you, it's my fun question. I always like to end with a fun question. If we were to book a trip to Croatia, do you have any recommendations about must-visit sites or times of the year to visit your beautiful country?
Okay, so you have to avoid July and August, which is the busiest time, and it's impossible to see anything or go anywhere, and it's too hot. My personal favorite, like September is okay to visit. You still have a good length days and decent weather most of the times, but my preference is June. When the days are the longest, there's still not so much, crowds, and yet everything is open for tourism, so you can do all the things without waiting in line. And in terms of places, I would definitely recommend some islands. There are a lot of towns that you can visit that are really beautiful, that really, Dubrovnik is known throughout the world as this place to visit, and it is just as beautiful as it's like portrayed in the photos. But my personal favorite, apart from my island, which is super small and doesn't have a lot of tourists, is the island of Vis, VIS, which has this little fisherman village called Komija, which is, you can really blend in with the locals and feel like, what the Mediterranean was like maybe in 1980s. It still feels that way in many ways. So that would be my ultimate recommendation, Komija on Vis Island.
That is awesome. I will add it to my list.
Definitely.
So I want to thank you, Lidija, for your time this morning. I wish you all the luck with Slanting Towards the Sea. Know that I'm raving about it here, 6-7 hours away from you in Eastern Iowa. I hope more people will pick it up and discover your beautiful writing. And please do let us know when the next book is ready to come out. We'd love to do another virtual event, or maybe the publisher will send you to the States and you can come here. We'll just put it out in the world and it will manifest itself.
Exactly. We have something to work towards. That's great. That's a great goal.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure to spend time with you.
Yes, thank you. And thank you to everyone that joined us online. You can grab Lidija's book, Slanting Towards the Sea, either at swampfoxbookstore.com. We also recommend bookshop.org for those of you that have access to that. They are running a free shipping special this week through the 11th. And we hope that you will dive in and leave reviews in all of the places. So have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.